The night was unusually quiet. A brilliant half-moon hung high above the heavens, bathing the Duke's magnificent estate in a soft silver glow. Every corner of the palace shimmered beneath the moonlight, as if celebrating the arrival of its newest mistress. Tonight, she wasn't just another noblewoman. She was the Duke's bride, the new Duchess. A wedding night is a once-in-a-lifetime dream. A night filled with love, warmth, and unforgettable memories. Yet inside the grand bridal chamber, only silence remained. The moonlight streamed gently through the enormous windows, painting the room in a peaceful silver light. It was beautiful, but somehow, it felt unbearably lonely. Only one question echoed endlessly inside the bride's heart. Hasn't he returned yet? Sitting quietly on the edge of the bed, she stared toward the door, wondering if her groom had any intention of coming at all. Surprisingly, she wasn't angry, because unlike everyone else, this wasn't her first marriage to the Duke. In her previous life, she had fallen hopelessly in love with him, believing every warm embrace, every moment they shared was proof that he loved her too. But that beautiful dream ended in betrayal, and eventually, it cost her life. Now fate had granted her a second chance. This marriage wasn't built on love. It was nothing more than a one-year contract. Perhaps that was for the best, because she had sworn never to become the foolish woman she once was. There was one reason she desperately wished to spend this night beside him. Just one. She wanted to see her son again, Asiel, the child she cherished more than her own life. If spending one night with the Duke meant she could hold her precious son once more, then she was willing to endure this painful lie all over again. While waiting for her groom, the Duke, she sat silently at a nearby desk, putting pen to paper as she tried to pass the painfully slow hours. Suddenly, someone entered the room, silently making his way toward her from behind. "I thought you would already be asleep," the Duke's calm voice suddenly whispered beside her ear. Her entire body jolted. She turned around in shock, her eyes widening. Duke Herden. Since when? The Duke lowered his cold, unreadable gaze toward her. "It's our wedding night," his voice remained calm. "Shouldn't we spend it together?" Her eyes immediately dropped to the floor. "I didn't think you would come." The Duke stood so close that they could feel each other's breath. A faint blush spread across her cheeks. Without another word, the Duke gently lifted her chin, forcing her trembling eyes to meet his. "Sounds like you've already prepared yourself for our wedding night." Her face turned scarlet.
"We don't necessarily have to."
Before she could speak further, the Duke drew her into a firm embrace, slowly leaning in, his lips inching closer to hers. She froze, unable to move, but deep inside, she kept repeating the same words to herself. "This isn't love. They say sharing a bed doesn't guarantee sharing a heart." Looking back, she couldn't argue with that. In her previous life, she had mistaken this very warmth, the same gentle comfort, for genuine affection, and that belief had destroyed her. This time, she swore she would never be fooled again. Tonight wasn't about love. It was about one precious wish: to see her son just one more time. And if enduring this wedding night was the only way to make that happen, then she would relive it again and again, even if it meant sharing the same bed with the same man she believed had taken her life before her regression. Now, let's return to her previous life. 2 years before her regression, winter had completely consumed the capital. Snow drifted endlessly from the heavens, covering every street in a blanket of white. After months on the battlefield, the Duke had finally returned to the capital. But the Duke's visit lasted only a moment. Just as he was about to board his carriage and depart once again, a desperate voice echoed across the snow-covered streets. "Herden." The Duke immediately halted. Turning around, he saw the Duchess desperately running toward him. Despite carrying a child that was nearly ready to be born, she paid no attention to the slippery roads, nor to the freezing wind that cut through her body. The moment she learned her husband had returned to the capital, she rushed to find him without a second thought. For 6 long months, she counted every single day, dreaming of the moment they would finally meet again. She desperately pleaded with him to stop at the estate, but the only response she received was the Duke's cold, emotionless stare. His icy gaze made the winter air feel even colder. Without saying a word, she understood. Coming home was never an option, so she pleaded for just 30 minutes of his time. The Duke stared at her in silence. Then, he quietly nodded. A few moments later, the two climbed into the same carriage. Ironically, although they were husband and wife, they sat on opposite sides like complete strangers. The silence inside the carriage was suffocating. She had imagined this reunion countless times. Yet now that he was before her, every word escaped her. She finally spoke. "When will you return to the capital?" "I'm not sure. I can't promise anything." She forced another question. "Did you receive my letters?" "You never replied, not even once." Before she could say another word, a sudden kick from the baby made her flinch. Despite the discomfort, a gentle smile bloomed across her face. "I think the baby recognizes its father. Would you like to feel it? For the briefest moment, hope returned to her eyes. Just maybe, their child could become the bridge that finally closed the distance between them. The Duke answered without the slightest hesitation. No, I'm fine. 3 simple words. Yet, they struck harder than any sword ever could. Without another glance, the Duke quietly stood up, then walked toward the carriage door. The Duchess never tried to stop him. She simply lowered her head, watching in silence. Outside, snow continued to fall. Cold, silent, just like the distance separating husband and wife. Just as the Duke was about to leave, the Duchess desperately called out one last time. Please, name our baby before you go. His footsteps finally stopped. After a long silence, he answered without turning around. If it's a girl, Diana, and if it's a boy, Asiel. If you'd rather choose another name, that's fine too. No, I'll use those names. To anyone else, they were simply names, nothing more. But to the Duchess, they meant everything. Because for the very first time, since she became pregnant, the father had finally given something to his unborn child, even if it was only a name. That alone was enough to treasure. But who exactly was Duke Herden Delmark, the continent's only magic swordsman, a legendary war hero, blessed by the divine beast itself, a man whose name alone inspired admiration? As for his wife, she was Blair Delmark, the princess of the Ardell imperial family, and now, the Duchess of Delmark. Not long after she became pregnant, Duke Herden left for the Delmark Duchy. Officially, it was to subjugate demonic beast, but Blair knew the truth. It was nothing more than an excuse to put as much distance between them as possible. Their marriage was nothing more than a political arrangement. After all, their families had been enemies for years. Blair believed that was why her husband resented her. Even so, she still longed to remain by his side, because no matter how strong she tried to be, facing everything alone was too frightening. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Yet Herden never returned, not even on the day their son, Asiel, was born. Another 6 months passed before the Duke finally came home. But he wasn't alone. Walking beside him was a breathtaking woman with dazzling silver hair. And the moment Blair saw them together, the fragile hope she had desperately protected began to crumble. Moments earlier, just before the Duke's carriage reached the estate, a palace maid came running into the Duchess's room with exciting news. Your Grace, the Duke has returned. The moment Blair heard those words, her exhausted face instantly lit up. Without wasting another second, she hurriedly picked up the little boy in her arms. Asiel, she smiled warmly, gently brushing his tiny hair. Your father is finally home. Let's go welcome him together. Joy filled both mother and son. Since the day Asiel was born, he had never once laid eyes on his father. Half a year had passed since the Duke returned to the north. Every lonely night since then, Blair had fallen asleep with tears in her eyes. He can't hate me forever. Standing beside the palace window, Blair quietly watched the approaching carriage. Hope slowly filled her heart. Things were different now. Herden was no longer just a duke. He was a father. And she was finally a mother. Maybe, just maybe, their son could become the reason they finally became a real family. All she ever wished for was a proper family. Even if they were starting late, she believed it wasn't too late for their son. But the man she had spent countless nights waiting for returned with another woman at his side, a breathtaking beauty. The warmth that had kept her going disappeared in an instant, replaced by a heartbreak too deep for tears to express. Within minutes, rumors spread throughout the entire ducal estate. Even the servants couldn't hide their curiosity. During the commotion, the Duke calmly introduced the woman. She was a priestess, a woman who had been traveling on a sacred pilgrimage under the goddess's divine will. Fortunately, she encountered the Duke's knights while they were under attack by demonic beasts and saved their lives. Impressed by her extraordinary abilities, the Duke invited her to join his campaign. A brilliant priestess and a war hero who saw her worth. From then on, she remained by his side, serving him with absolute trust and unwavering devotion. That was the extent of their relationship. But the servants didn't believe it. They're together almost every single day. It's obvious they're in love. I mean, who wouldn't choose a beautiful, talented woman over the daughter of his family's longtime rival? Hidden behind a nearby corridor, Blair heard every single word. Each whisper stabbed into her heart like another knife. Yet, she refused to believe them. No, they had to be wrong. They had to be. Summer quietly slipped away. Autumn soon followed. Before long, another bitter winter arrived. Time continued moving, but nothing ever changed. Herden buried himself in work. He never once came looking for Blair. No matter how often she sought him out, he always turned her away. Eventually, she gave up trying to bridge the distance between them. There was one small comfort. It was that the Duke occasionally showed interest in Asiel. Clinging to that faint glimmer of hope, Blair decided to try one last time. Their son's first birthday was only 15 days away. Gathering every ounce of courage, Blair walked toward the Duke's office. She only had one simple wish. Let's travel together to the villa in Holstein and spend a few days together as a family. Nothing more. Just then, a faint sound caught her attention. Turning toward the office, she noticed the door slowly creak open. Curious, she quietly stepped closer and peeked inside. What awaited her beyond the door was a sight she was never meant to witness. There stood her husband embracing the priestess. Completely unaware of Blair's presence, the Duke gently pulled the priestess into his arms, holding her close as he pressed a tender kiss against her forehead.
I love you, Your Excellency.
The moment those words left the priestess's lips, Blair felt her world collapse. Unable to bear another second, she turned away and fled before the tears could betray her. A few days later, Asiel celebrated his first birthday. It wasn't extravagant, but it was filled with warmth. The servants gathered around the little boy, congratulating him one after another. He enjoyed delicious food, opened countless presents prepared by the retainers. Laughter echoed throughout the mansion. It should have been the perfect birthday, except one person never came: his father. Night eventually fell. Blair gently cradled Asiel in her arms, softly singing him to sleep. Now, it's time for bed, she smiled, carefully laying him inside his cradle. Just then, the little boy suddenly looked toward the window, raising a tiny finger as if searching for someone beyond the night sky. Blair froze. For a brief moment she couldn't help but wonder. Did Asiel somehow know? Had he been waiting all day, hoping his father would come home to celebrate his very first birthday? Holding back her tears, she gently stroked his tiny head. He'll come, she whispered with a smile she no longer believed. Your father will come before today ends. She quietly left the room, closing the door behind her. The moment she was alone, her strength disappeared. She leaned against the wooden door. Slowly, her body slid to the floor. The tears she had desperately held back all day finally broke free. Asiel knows nothing, she sobbed. He's still at the age where a child needs the love of both parents more than anything. For the first time, Blair regretted ever falling in love with such a heartless man. But just as despair threatened to consume her, footsteps echoed from behind. Blair's heart leaped. She believed the Duke had finally come. But the moment she lifted her head, her blood ran cold. A masked figure stood before her, his dagger already plunging toward her chest. The moment Blair sensed the assassin's murderous intent, every instinct inside her screamed the same thing: protect Asiel. Without thinking twice, Blair sprinted toward her chamber. Her footsteps echoed through the silent hallway, yet she desperately tried to keep them as quiet as possible. If Asiel woke and cried, the assassin would find him. She couldn't let that happen, even if it meant giving up her own life. Blair burst into her chamber, but the hooded assassin followed without slowing down. His blood-red eyes never left his target. Panic consumed her. Her eyes locked onto something else: the emergency bell rope. Without hesitation, she threw herself toward it. Help, please. Her trembling fingers barely managed to grab the rope. The assassin lunged at the very last moment. Blair's blood splattered across the chamber, staining the floor crimson. Ding! The enormous palace bell shattered the silence of the night. Again, ding, ding, ding. Its desperate echoes spread across the entire estate. Every pull carried the same silent prayer: please, save my son. Far from Blair's chamber, a maid suddenly froze. That's Madame's bell. At this hour? No, something's wrong. That wasn't the gentle ring of a noble woman requesting tea. It was frantic, a cry for help. Without another word, the servants rushed toward the Duchess's chambers. Back inside the room, Blair's hands still clung desperately to the bell rope. She lay motionless on the cold floor, the assassin's dagger buried in her chest as crimson slowly spread beneath her. The assassin silently withdrew his blade. At that very moment, footsteps thundered into the room as the maids finally arrived. My lady! Their horrified screams echoed through the chamber. The hooded assassin silently disappeared into the darkness before anyone could stop him. Blair lay motionless, her white gown soaked in crimson. Even as death crept closer with every passing second, her thoughts weren't about herself. They were only about her son. What will happen to poor Asiel? He only just found his mother. Her vision blurred as tears rolled down her cheeks. Her eyes slowly lost their light, and with one final thought of Asiel, her consciousness slipped away into darkness. Everything became silent. She died. But instead of eternal darkness, gasp, Blair's eyes flew open, drenched in cold sweat as her heart pounded against her chest. Asiel. His name escaped her lips before she could even think. She frantically looked around only to realize the blood-soaked chamber had vanished. She was shocked to discover she wasn't dead, but there was something far more important on her mind. Is anyone there? Where's my child? Her trembling voice echoed through the room. A familiar maid hurried inside. Your Highness, you're finally awake. But Blair ignored the greeting completely. Lena, where's Asiel? The maid blinked in confusion. Asiel, you mean the stray kitten in the garden? Did your Highness give it a name? Blair's expression instantly hardened. Lena, this isn't funny. Where is my son? Where's Asiel? Before Lena could answer, something finally felt wrong. Blair slowly looked around the room. The luxurious ceiling, the royal furnishings. This wasn't the Delmark Duchy. This was the Imperial Palace. Why am I here? Your Highness, what are you talking about? A son? How could your Highness possibly have a son? You're not even married yet. Those words struck Blair like lightning. An impossible thought suddenly crossed her mind. Lena, how old am I? This year, 20. The answer came without hesitation. Blair froze. 20. Which meant she had returned 3 years into the past. Later that afternoon, the Imperial family gathered for lunch. Everything looked perfectly ordinary. To everyone else, it was just another peaceful day. But for Blair, nothing felt real. Was her previous life merely a dream? Or had she truly died and returned to the past? Before Asiel was born, before she married Herden, she was so lost in her memories that she didn't even realize her name had been called several times. Princess, a maid whispered softly, snapping Blair out of her daze. Her Majesty, the Empress Dowager is calling you. Blair finally looked up. The Empress smiled faintly. Blair, your mind has been somewhere else this whole time. Did something happen this morning? Before Blair could answer, the Emperor calmly set down his utensils. His authoritative voice filled the dining hall. We were discussing your marriage to Duke Herden Delmark. Prepare yourself, and do not create unnecessary trouble. I know you dislike arranged marriages, but you are a princess of this empire. Those words instantly awakened memories Blair desperately wanted to forget. In her past life, when this conversation happened, she stubbornly refused the marriage. She fought against everyone. She wanted nothing to do with Herden. But this time, everything was different. Blair slowly lifted her head. I'll do it. Her answer rang through the hall with unwavering resolve, leaving even the Emperor stunned. Blair met his gaze without hesitation. If it is your Majesty's will, then I shall obey. This time she accepted the marriage willingly. Since opening her eyes, one question had tortured her. Was everything she remembered merely a dream? Or was this reality? No matter how many times she replayed those memories, they felt too real. Asiel's tiny voice, calling her mother, his warm little hands, his innocent smile. Every memory remained painfully vivid, which made this world without him feel unbearably empty. My baby, she whispered, wrapping her arms around nothing but the cold breeze. My hope, my world, my entire reason for living. If fate had truly sent her back in time, then she only had one purpose left, to see Asiel again, no matter the cost. Even if it meant marrying the very man she believed had once destroyed her life, she would do it, because somewhere in that uncertain future, her precious son was waiting to be born once again. With her resolve finally set in stone, Blair turned to her personal maid and spoke with quiet determination. Lena, I need you to deliver a message to the Delmark Duchy. Request an audience with Duke Herden. Lena froze. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Your Highness? The princess noticed her reaction immediately. Why do you look so surprised? Oh, it's nothing. I'll send a messenger right away. Without another word, she hurried out of the room. Yet even as she walked through the palace corridors, questions flooded her mind. Just a few months ago, Her Highness had done everything possible to avoid Duke Herden. She had even refused to meet him during the imperial banquet. So, what exactly had changed? To understand why everyone found this so shocking, we need to look back. 10 years earlier, had never been peaceful. Blair's father, the late emperor, had 2 women by his side, his lawful wife, Empress Esmeralda, and his imperial concubine, Katrina. For years, the empress remained childless. As a result, Katrina was brought into the palace as nothing more than a concubine. At first, Katrina possessed neither influence nor political power. She was merely a gypsy woman inside the imperial palace. But everything changed the moment she gave birth to a son, Prince Ivan. Suddenly, nobles hungry for power began flocking to Katrina's side. What began as quiet political rivalry soon escalated into an all-out war between the 2 factions. Yet despite standing on opposite sides, people often said something surprising. Empress Esmeralda genuinely loved Blair. even though Blair was the daughter of her greatest political rival. Until one tragic day changed everything. The infamous Empress Palace fire incident. A mysterious fire engulfed the Empress's palace. By the time it ended, Empress Esmeralda was dead, and Blair, who happened to be with the Empress on that tragic day, barely survived. The trauma was so severe, she supposedly lost every memory of what happened. The Emperor immediately launched an investigation. When the dust finally settled, every piece of evidence pointed toward only one suspect, the deceased Empress herself. She was branded a traitor. The Delmark family desperately denied the accusations, but no one listened. In the end, Empress Esmeralda was buried, not as a beloved queen, but as a traitor. Back to the present, Blair's messenger from the Imperial Palace finally reached the Delmark Duchy. The letter was delivered directly into the hands of Duke Herden Delmark, the one and only nephew of Empress Esmeralda. Back inside the Imperial Palace, Lena couldn't stop complaining under her breath. His Majesty is so heartless. Her Highness was the victim of that tragedy. There's no way she would ever willingly accept this marriage. But strangely, Blair looked almost cheerful. A smile Lena hadn't seen in years quietly rested on her face. Before long, the Duke's carriage arrived outside the princess's residence. After receiving Blair's invitation, Herden came without delay. Inside the palace, Blair slowly walked toward the meeting chamber. Every step echoed through the hallway. In her previous life, she had desperately searched for excuses to avoid this man. But now, she had every reason to marry him, because only through this marriage could she bring Asiel back into existence. Before her thoughts drifted any further, the massive chamber doors slowly opened. Standing on the other side was Duke Herden Delmark. Blair immediately composed herself. "Thank you for coming despite your busy schedule, Duke Delmark." Herden respectfully lowered his head. "I greet Her Imperial Highness." He gently lifted Blair's hand, placing a formal kiss upon it. His movements were flawless, yet completely devoid of warmth. The sight irritated Blair. She quietly withdrew her hand. "Let's get straight to the point. The marriage proposal my brother presented, I have no intention of refusing it." Herden calmly replied. "I suppose refusing His Majesty's command would be difficult." 1 year. Blair interrupted him before he could continue. "Remain married to me for exactly 1 year. After 1 year, we divorce, and I'll take full responsibility." She continued without hesitation. "I won't cling to you, and I won't trouble you with meaningless things, like love." Then, she revealed her true bargaining chip. "If you agree, I'll fully cooperate in uncovering the truth behind the Empress Palace fire incident." The room instantly fell silent. For the first time, Herden's calm expression cracked. A bitter smile slowly appeared across his face. His anger had finally surfaced. 10 years ago, after his aunt was branded a traitor, Herden personally wrote Blair a letter. Inside it, he pleaded with her. "My aunt could never commit such a crime. You know that. Please, clear my aunt's name." But Blair had only given him one answer. "I don't remember anything." Herden's eyes darkened with restrained anger. He was convinced she was lying to protect the imperial family over justice. From that day onward, a deep resentment settled inside his heart. And even now, 10 years later, he had never let it go. After a long silence, Herden finally spoke. "Why are you so determined to marry me?" "Nothing much. Marriage is the only way I can leave the imperial palace. If that's your only reason, why not marry someone who actually loves you?" Love. That single word dragged Blair back into memories she desperately wished to forget. She quietly lifted her teacup, taking one slow sip. Silence filled the room. She calmly looked into Herden's eyes. "I don't believe in love." Her voice never wavered. "I have no interest in promises of forever. I prefer relationships with clear boundaries. A relationship where both sides know exactly what they're giving and exactly what they're taking." Herden fell silent, his fist clenching beneath the table. After a long pause, he accepted Blair's proposal. Truthfully, he had never intended to defy the Emperor's decree. Besides, the marriage came with one condition. The imperial family would approve an expansion of the Delmark Duchy's military forces. After the Empress's alleged treason, the Duchy's army had been cut in half. Yet they were still expected to guard the northern frontier and subjugate endless waves of demonic beasts. Without reinforcements, the task was simply impossible. Then it was an opportunity he couldn't ignore. As far as Herden was concerned, he would simply use Blair to uncover the truth, complete the 1-year marriage, then walk away forever. The discussion was over. Herden rose from his seat, preparing to leave. "Herden," Blair suddenly called out. He stopped, turning around. She hesitated, but the words refused to come. "It's nothing. You may go." Herden quietly nodded and left, but inside, her heart was in turmoil. There was one question she desperately needed answered, yet she couldn't bring herself to ask it. Purdon, were you the one who killed me? In the end, she swallowed the words, burying the question deep within her heart. But was the Duke truly the mastermind behind her death? Or was there a far more sinister truth hiding in the shadows? We'll uncover everything in the next episode. If you enjoyed today's recap, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Otakufam, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next recap.